Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Baradhare. Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Baradhare. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Baradhare. Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Baradhare. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Vishnavad, Paramahansa, Paravajacharyas, Titus Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON Spondracharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Ki, Sri Giri Govardhan Ki, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki, Sankirtan Yagya Ki, Gopremanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 25. The descriptions of the characteristics of King Puranjan, text 49. Okay. Mukhya Nama Purastad Dvas Tayapana Bahodana Vishaya Yati Pura Rad Rasagya Vipananvita Mukhyanama Purastadvas Tayapana Bahodana Vishayo Yati Pura Rad Rasagya Vipananvita Mukhyanama Purastadvas Tayapana Bahodana Vishayao Yati Pura Rad Rasagya Vipananvita Mukhyanama Purastadvas Tayapana Bahodana Vishayao Yati Pura Rad Rasagya Vipananvita. Ladies, Mukhya, the chief, Nama, called Purastat, on the eastern side, Dva, gate, Taya, by that, Apana, of the name Apana, Bahudana, of the name Bahudana, Vishaya, two places, Yati, used to go, Purarat, the king of the city, Puranjan, Rasagya, of the name Rasagya, Vipana, of the name Vipana, Anvita, along with. Translation. The fifth gate, situated on the eastern side, was named Mukhya, or the chief. Through this gate, accompanied by his friends named Rasagya and Vipana, he used to visit two places named Bahudana and Apana. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mouth is here described as the chief, or the most important gate. The mouth is a very important entrance because one has two functions to conduct with the mouth. One function is eating, and the other is speaking. Our eating is done with the friend Rasagya, the tongue, which can taste so many different types of foods. The tongue is also used for speaking, and it can speak of either material sense enjoyment or Vedic knowledge. Of course, here material sense enjoyment is stressed. Therefore the word rasagya is used. Mukhya nama parastadvas tayapana bahudanao vishyayo yati purarad rasagya vipananvita. The fifth gate, situated on the eastern side, was named Mukhya, or the chief. Through this gate, accompanied by his friends named Rasagya and Vipana, he used to visit two places named Bahudana and Apana. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadesha Tarane Vanchakalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhupya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes, so the body is being described as being like a city, basically like a city in so many ways. It's very interesting, actually. It's very interesting. It's already been described in the same chapter, but in verse 12, so some days ago, a week or whatever it may be, in our series of classes, that the city, now it's a city called, he goes out to visit Apana and Bahudana. The city called Apana represents engagement of the tongue in speech, and Bahudana is the variety of foodstuffs. Then the right ear is called the gate of Pitrihu, and the left ear is called the gate of Devahu. So it's all interesting and important. It's definitely important how the conditioned soul, just a sec, how the conditioned soul is caught up in the material world, in the material body. There is a description here which I just saw earlier this morning, that not apana, but apana, which is different, isn't it? Is one of the main ears. Let's just see here. So anyway, yes, the conditioned soul is entangled in the material body, and it's just a usually very difficult situation. It depends how these things are engaged. The mouth is described here as the chief gate. The chief gate. And as we read, Prabhupada says, it's a very important entrance because it has two functions. Most of the other gates have one function generally, but here there are two functions, and both are very foundational types of functions. One function is eating, the other is speaking. And yes, so it depends what you eat, and it depends what you speak. And of course, what you eat and what you speak are influenced in different ways, but they're influenced by the association you have, and therefore the attachments you develop, the attractions you develop. And you may eat all sorts of undesirable things. I remember many years ago, it was in the 70s, was it? No, it was in the 80s, sorry. It was in the 80s, later 80s, we were thinking of purchasing another farm to replace our Cato Ridge farm. So I was the one who was going around looking at different farms. And one farm was owned by some people from France. And so they showed me around here and there and looked around. Then we saw they had one, not exactly area, but like a box, big box. I mean, maybe several meters by several meters, something like that. And in it were, probably I shouldn't even mention this, but snails. And then, so, it was like, whoa, what on earth is this now? But then I remembered from things I had heard from my youth that French people, Haribol, you get the idea, don't you? Les escargots, that's snails in French. Anyway, and it was quite shocking. I'd never seen that, other than just sort of hearing vaguely. I'd never actually seen that, but obviously these people were into it, because there are loads of snails there. Anyway, Hare Krishna, enough about that. But the thing is that these, in principle, in general, these things are going on. People are eating all sorts of things. I don't know if it was actually Prabhupada said, but one disciple was saying how he had been somewhere in Southeast Asia in like some sort of block of flats where everything was sort of open, and when people would cook, everyone would smell what you're cooking. Just, that's what it was, situation. So the devotees cooked in very nice ghee, some nice sabjis and things as devotees do, in very nice ghee. And some of the fellow, the other flat livers, they complained that to the management, the people who are supervising the block of flats, that, these people, what are they doing? It's horrible. And it wasn't horrible, it was just really nice. And then they, the other flat dwellers, sort of local people, they cooked up, not snails, but other things, shall we say, which we definitely shouldn't talk about because it's just a bit too shocking. And Sri Radha Radhanath Sri Giri Govardhan Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So, right. And the devotees were subjected to smelling that, because anything which got cooked, the smell pervaded basically the whole setup. And the people, like a number of them, it wasn't just one family or one group, but a number of them were cooking basically the same type of thing, which the devotees found the smell to just be horrible. And, different modes and different attractions, appreciations, and different diets. So it's like that. So one function of the tongue or the mouth is eating, and it just depends what modes people are in, what they'll be attracted to eating. But it's certainly an extremely important function of the mouth. Obviously it's just for life one has to eat, but then one ends up eating certain particular things in terms of one's modes. So, and of course, this eating function of mukhya, as described here, kind of, you could say, poetic or colorful type of description, that this mukhya, the chief gate, when he went through the gate, that particular gate, then the living entity wouldn't go alone, but would go, in this regard, accompanied by rasagya, which is the tongue, and the tongue is particularly that part of the structure of the mouth which tastes different types of foods. So, prasadam is generally, or to the very large extent, attractive and even extremely attractive. Actually, we find some maybe unlikely people who become attracted to Krishna consciousness on the basis of tasting prasadam. I'm sure you've all heard, how many times has it been mentioned, I don't know, but when Gokulendra, the late Gokulendra Prabhu, was getting our application for our registration as a legal entity, sort of religious legal entity in South Africa, then he had to go to Pretoria and deal with the people there, the sort of secretarial people. So he handed over, this was 1973, he handed, 75, excuse me, it was 75. He handed over the documentation, and this man looked at it, and Gokulendra said that, yes, we want to register as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON. And the man, who was really a government person, he said, he looked at it all, and then he said that, well, look, this is South Africa. You cannot register as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON. You must register as the South African Society for Krishna, SASKCON. So there's a little back and forth between the two of them. And Gokulendra Prabhu was trying to make it clear enough to the man that, look, we are part of an international organization, which is like in many countries, and so because we're part of that, we must be the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON. But this man was saying, no. You must be the South African Society for Krishna Consciousness, SASKCON. And they were not, well, Gokulendra Prabhu could see he was not making progress in sort of trying to convince the man or make it clear the validity of the name. Then he remembered that in his bag he had some Simply Wonderfuls made by his then wife, Jagannatheshwari Devi Dasi. So he pulled one out, kind of fairly substantial, Simply Wonderful. We're all familiar with Simply Wonderfuls. And he said, here, look, my wife made this for you. Take it, eat it. This is not what usually happens when you're trying to register a legal organization. So the man was taken aback, and he held it up and looked at it from different angles, sort of turned it around. And then he just opened his mouth and just sort of almost threw it, at least placed the whole thing one time in his mouth. And then he was chewing away, and it was clear he was enjoying it. It was very nice. So he finished it and said, all right, you can be the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON. Otherwise, who knows what might have happened. But that's the power of prasadam. I mean, in a sense, you could say it's the power of food, but of course, particularly in this case, it's the power of prasadam. It's transcendentally surcharged. Yes, so therefore this function of eating, and for the devotees, eating prasadam, and indeed really eating only prasadam, at least, if one has to travel out somewhere and there's no devotee association or temples or places where prasadam can be prepared in the sort of the regular sense of cooking something and offering it, then at least one, if one has some fruit and things of that sort, at least one can offer that. Yes. And some of our devotees in Germany, I remember the whole subject coming up in Srila Prabhupada's time, that they were very, would you say, ambitious or, like merciful or whatever, I'm not sure what term you'd use, but they would do things like when they went, because they were doing traveling Sankirtan, distributing books and moving around and living in a vehicle. So what they would do, they would go into a supermarket every day or every couple of days, whatever, and they would, as far as they were concerned, offer the whole supermarket. And of course the point was raised that supermarkets, they have all sorts of food, and it's not all in the categories which we can offer to the Supreme Lord. So their logic was that, well, if there's something, wherever there's something like that, Krishna just won't accept it, but we'll just offer everything. And then they would go up to sometimes, this is pretty often, they would go up to where the city water supply reservoir was, like a big lake sort of thing, a dam, and they'd offer the whole reservoir, probably millions, I guess, many thousands, really many thousands of liters of water. But when Srila Prabhupada was informed about this, Srila Prabhupada said, no, this is not, we don't do this, so please stop doing that. But anyway, eating and drinking, these are very important. Not just important, they're vital functions for every living entity. And we, of course, in our childhoods, we had little bodies when we were babies and when we were children and step by step growing up. But now, at least when one becomes an adult, one has a much bigger body than one had when one was a small child. And the body is made, this current body, is made of food. It's actually made of food, transformed by the digestive process. Yes. And sometimes you get these sort of like political activists, people like that, They go on hunger fasts, and they don't eat for weeks, maybe even a month or some length of time. And depending on the government, if the government is more sort of, a little more sensitively minded, after a while they may just say, oh, okay, and get him the person to eat again or agree to his demands. But in some places where the government is not so sensitive, they just let him die. And they die. Yes. So eating is totally essential. Certain other functions may not be totally essential, but eating definitely is. And then, of course, there is the function of speaking. And again, the same principle applies. Depending on a person's situation, they will speak about different things. And in basic terms, either Krishna conscious things or non-Krishna conscious things, material things. And as they are living, they'll speak in these different ways, and some may even speak in sort of both ways depending on different situations they get into, some devotees. But speaking is another thing. It's not exactly essential that you must speak. If you don't speak, the body cannot survive, like with eating. But it's such a strongly ingrained tendency in the living being to speak that it's, to maintain a vow of silence is extremely difficult. When Prabhupada was preaching in America, he was told of one Indian Swami type person who had come to America and was being promoted as a spiritual person, and he had taken a Mauna Vrata. He'd taken a vow not to speak. But people would come and sometimes ask questions, and what he would do, he would write out the answers, which of course takes a lot more time than just speaking. And when Prabhupada heard about this, he felt it was just, anyway, obviously something foolish, which it was. Yes, and otherwise, Prabhupada defined in Krishna conscious terms, Mauna Vrata, or a vow of silence, to only talk about Krishna consciousness, and related things. That is like a proper Mauna Vrata. Yes, so these functions are very important. Eating, of course, there are different gates in the body. And I have, of course, I just got here, so I'm not sure. There are different gates have been mentioned already, yes. All different gates, the last certain number of verses have been described. This gate, well, it's named Mukhya, or the chief, because eating, well, in fact, Srila Prabhupada talked about, at least we're told he talked about, when one time the tongue, anyway, the tongue went on strike. Which organ was it went on strike? Anyway, some organ or something went on strike. Is it the tongue? went on strike, okay, that, I have to eat so much and didn't want to carry on with that. Yeah. So then the person made attempts to, because there are other gates, like the ears, push some food in through the ears, the nose, Hare Krishna. But it didn't work. And the body started feeling run down. And then the body decided, okay, we will take food through the mouth again, and became strong. So like this mouth, gosh, is so important. Because of two functions. Generally, like the ears have one function. And the nose, well, you could also say it has two functions, perhaps. One is to take an air, and the other is to smell. But, to take an air, of course, is essential, but you could take it in through your mouth if you really wanted to. And, after some devotees have told me, and it's my own experience, that after many years, or what we would consider many years, of chanting japa, and having the practice of breathing in through the mouth, one sort of gets the habit of not breathing through the nose as much, but of breathing through the mouth quite a bit. But actually it's better to breathe through the nose. From the health point of view, it is actually better to breathe through the nose. Although you can just breathe through your mouth. And you're not going to die as a result, which, if you don't eat, you'll certainly die after some time. So there's some flexibility in that sense with the nose. The ear, of course, the ears are only for hearing, and there's no other function really. But the mouth, there are these two functions, and even more if we include breathing as a possible function. So therefore the mouth is described as mukhya, the chief gate, the most important gate. And we have to eat through the mouth. The ears, I assume they've already been discussed, or maybe they're going to be discussed. But the ears are particularly for hearing, and they're also vital in that sense. We have to hear, and we have to, ideally, of course, properly, we have to hear transcendental sound vibration. And in that way we can become Krishna conscious. You could say we can become liberated. Or if you hear material sound vibration, the news, it's so depressing and horrible, actually, the news, it's amazing. But so if one makes the habit of hearing material sound vibration, then certainly the consciousness will be affected, and one will become materially conscious. The eyes see, they don't really do anything else. They just see. And therefore we have to use the eyes to see at least in terms of Krishna consciousness, as much as possible. Even Srila Prabhupada, there's a letter, it's in the collection of letters books. Prabhupada said that in Vrindavan, it was just after the opening of the temple, Prabhupada said that what the pujaris should do is they should dress the deities as quickly as possible and open the curtains So that the devotees who are chanting japa at that time, they can chant while seeing the deities. Prabhupada said like that it's beneficial for the chanting. We chant with our tongues, we hear the chanting with our ears, with our sense of touch, we handle the beads, or maybe some instruments if it's kirtan, but otherwise japa, we hear, our sense of touch is engaged. And what about the sense of smell? You could possibly have some offered incense nearby, something like that. And that way, these senses can be engaged. As much as possible, we should engage our senses, as many of our senses as we can in the process. Yes. So anyway, like this, these things are being discussed here. The importance of the mouth as the most important gate into the city of the body. Yes. Like that. Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions? Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So I just want to bring that back the one point he was making about prasadam. So we went to the university yesterday. So Rukmani, Madhuri Karabini and myself went to distribute biryanis, some prasadam. So the aim for giving them biryani is just for them to invite them to come to our programs. So the moment we set it up, the table, so we had a huge crowd that's coming by just for the biryani and stuff. So that creates a huge impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, biryani, or just eating in general, is an extremely popular activity. Hearing about, like hearing mantras, it depends. But it may not be as popular with people who are not experienced in these things as eating biryani or just eating prasadam. And, coming to a program where you sit down and you listen to someone giving a class of some sort, that's another thing which, it depends on what the person is speaking about, how attractive it may be or not be. But nice, tasty food, and particularly nice, tasty prasadam, we see, well, as you experienced yesterday, it's really very attractive. It's extremely attractive. I remember the first time we went to Mozambique, we brought with us like food for life pots and rice and so on, and dal, and we entered Mozambique. We were there, I think, a week or something, and one day we went to do food for life. But now the people there are very suspicious of food, which, they don't know really exactly where it's coming from, because, anyway, for different reasons, but maybe it has some black magic on it, is one of the reasons. Oh yeah. And so maybe it's going to affect me in some adverse way. So what we did, there we are, we set up, okay, here we are, and someone in the local language said something, Okay, come and get it. They stood there looking at us. Nobody came, not a single person. So what we did, we started in front of them eating the prasadam a bit. I mean, there's 5 or 6 maybe of us or something. And we weren't just eating away, but we're eating and saying to each other, "Oh, how wonderful! Oh, it's so nice! Oh, yes, it's great!" And then one by one, the people started coming because they could see, that it wasn't having an adverse effect on us. And yet we wiped out the whole, big pot, few hundred people, good few hundred people. And they loved it. Yeah. In fact, one extraordinary thing happened. One taxi, the typical taxis, Hi-Ace or something, came past us slowly, watching what we were doing. And the driver became so distracted, he drove into another vehicle. Oh yeah, it happened there, sure. But considering the sort of the makeup and the consciousness of the conditioned soul, prasadam, particularly nice prasadam, at least on an immediate level, may well be more immediately attractive to your conditioned soul to take part in. I mentioned last night, we did a program in a sort of like a technical college in Cape Town on Monday, later afternoon, 5-ish. And they wouldn't let us use one of the lecture halls, but we went to a residence. As it happened, would you believe, it was a ladies' residence. So the audience was all, and I mean all, ladies. And one devotee started kirtan, and did they get into it? Sure, they got into it so much. They were just dancing wildly, at least many of them, because that's also part of their conditioned nature, you can say, for that type of person from, like African backgrounds. Then, yes, on Tuesday, we did a program in the UCT, and it was a smaller group, much smaller group, and we had kirtan, and a number of them, there was not many there, like 15 or 16 or something, and one devotee was leading kirtan. Not one of them responded, not one. They just sat there, and you could see it's just not part of the culture. The music, when there's drums and sort of, like a real active type of music. But eating, when the prasadam came out, everyone went for it. It's in so many cases much more easy for people to relate to than the philosophy, or in however many cases the chanting. So Prabhupada, when people visited the temple, I remember it was some late in Prabhupada's time with us, probably 77. Prabhupada said we must always have nice prasadam available so that every person who comes to visit can get a nice plate of nice prasadam. Yeah. And nobody should go away without receiving prasadam, because prasadam is such an important sort of medium for Krishna consciousness. It really is. Yes. Haribol. Biryani ki jai. Of course, there's biryani, and then there's biryani. Not all biryanis are equal. But a nice biryani is actually very nice. Okay.
Haribol.
Haribol.
We were speaking about the eyes, and the general function is to see.
Yeah.
Which we all, but in fact there's another function I was thinking about, is why I'm sitting here, is about reading Prabhupada's books. Without the eyes, I shouldn't be able to read.
That's right.
Yes.
True.
Thank you.
And people who can't see, blind people, they use braille. You know, it uses the sense of touch. And many devotees. Well, Prabhupada spoke the books. He didn't type them out in a visible form, ink on paper. He spoke the books. So when we're reading the books, even though we are reading now, it's converted into ink on paper. But in a sense, we're hearing from Prabhupada. Yes, and quite a number of Prabhupada's books are available as audio books, so people can listen to them. Yeah. So then the sense of hearing is engaged in, you could say, in the process of reading. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.